Hello and welcome to the AVForums podcast for Monday the 20th of March. Joining me on this edition, Assistant Editor Steve Withers.
Do I still have to sleep in the cupboard?
News Editor Mark Hodgkinson.
Can't stay in there forever.
Audio Reviewer Ed Selley.
How can you read this? There's no pictures.
And special guest star Mark Botwright.
I'll wear lipstick and rouge and I won't be so huge.
Beauty and the Beast, 1991. It was a new dawn for Disney back then, wasn't it? You know, hand-drawn, cell animation with a little bit of CGI, and Pixar came along only 4 years later and pissed all over their parade.
Well, it does have the honour of being the first and only film ever to be nominated, animated film ever to be nominated for Best Picture.
Yeah, it's one of these things, a provisional French town where everybody talks American. Everybody's American. Honest Trailers did this week.
They
and
did
they
a brilliant,
extremely well. Where
trailer.
obviously it's case study in Stockholm Syndrome, basically, which it is.
Yes.
I don't know, I've never seen that.
You've never seen Beauty and the Beast?
No.
There are some significant gaps in your film knowledge, aren't there? There really are.
There might be, but I don't regard this as being one of them.
I'm sure there was a vinyl release, Ed. You can listen to all the songs.
Actually, most of the Disney soundtracks have been given a vinyl re-release not that long ago.
Yeah.
I do actually own a Disney soundtrack on vinyl, but it's for the best Disney film there has ever been, Dumbo. So, you know.
Okay. Well, I had a quick listen to the new Beauty and the Beast because it turned up on Tidal and on Spotify. So I gave it a quick listen. Ewan McGregor, very allo accent there.
Yeah, very.
And that's his singing voice. I haven't heard any dialogue from the film yet. For anybody that wants to know, he's playing the candlestick, isn't he? So
Yeah, he's Lumiere.
yeah. Just going back to Toy Story, I mean, they really did, move on in not only in terms of animation, but obviously moved it on in terms of storytelling as well. Because Disney tropes of an old castle, a prince, a princess or a princess in waiting, and all the rest of it. I mean that goes all the way through Disney content. Whereas Toy Story really was cutting edge when it came to telling the story as well. And the weird thing, which was pointed out this week on Facebook, and I only just realised, is all the human characters have the same face
In Toy Story.
in Toy Story.
Yeah, well, I suppose they were pushing the envelope at the time in terms of what they could animate.
Yeah, but the strange thing is that there wasn't any father figures in that film either, if you think about it.
No, there wasn't, was there?
I learnt something about Toy Story 2 the other day, which I thought was quite amusing. In that halfway through its production, it was accidentally deleted from the Pixar servers because someone put a piece of housekeeping software on which couldn't tell the difference between scrap files and the actual files. And it's only because one of the animators was on maternity leave and had it backed up on her own equipment, which must have been pretty hefty for when it was being made. It's the only reason that film still exists, which I thought was quite bizarre.
That film had a very troubled production history because originally it was going to be a direct-to-video release, and then they realised that it was pretty good, and Disney switched it to saying, okay, well, we'll release it at the cinema. So they accelerated the production schedule, and that film, it's absolutely brilliant, but it was animated in a fraction of the time that they spent on the original Toy Story. It was incredible that it ended up being as good as it was, given its very torturous production history.
It's my favourite of the three.
Yeah, no, it's the best. It is the best. It's one of the all-time great sequels.
That opening sequence is just fantastic,
Yeah.
where they rip every Ben Burt sound effect is in that opening sequence. Everything that Ben Burt ever did was in there. It's brilliant. If you're in that case, like me and Steve, who look at these Easter eggs, then you have a great time in that film. They even do it towards the end as well, where he finds his father.
Yeah. No! The only father figure in those films, then.
It is actually, and if you think about the pets as well, I'm sure the pets have the same faces as the human characters as well. It's strange because the kid next door is the same as the kid in the what do you call him, Andy, and the guy next door who blows everything up. I can't remember his name now, but if you think about it, they're exactly the same character.
So either Andy's growing up in Stepford, or there's the milkman's doing his rounds with the plum,
or it's his dad, because remember his dad's out in the chair, so he's obviously tired out, poor guy. Mr. Botwright will have a theory on this.
Well, no, I was just wondering if it was a case of it was viewed from the kind of toys perspective, and all the toys are kind of human racist and they all look alike.
The John Motson defence.
I hadn't thought it that way around. Anyway, I think that covers Phil's intro for yet another week. Again, there was 9 written down there, so I had to ad-lib. Hopefully I did it okay that time. At least we didn't get into white goods. That's all I can
Don't
say.
say those 2 words, because otherwise we will.
Yeah.
That's how it works.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the audience was down last week, the week before. Maybe it was because we called it the white goods edition.
Perhaps.
Mark, cheer us up. What can we win?
You can win a really good prize. It's a 4K Ultra HD Premiere collection on disc, and titles include The Revenant, Kingsman, The Secret Life of Pi. I was going to say
That's a mashup.
It's a mashup. Life of Pi is available, and then there's also The Maze Runner, Independence Day, and Exodus: Gods and Kings.
Having trouble reading this morning?
I am, yeah. I'm very tired.
I won't ask you to go and proofread anything then.
No. Right, yeah.
And the competitions are open too?
All eligible members resident in the UK, Ireland, and the Isle of Man.
And any previous winners?
Unless we have a member called No.
We don't.
No, we don't.
Well, maybe we do. I don't know, actually.
I need clarification.
Okay, so moving on from competitions, let's go to some hardware news. This is very much going to be the Steve Withers podcast this week. I'm surprised he's still alive, the amount of jet lag that he probably will be suffering. What was it? It was a one-day turnaround from getting back from the US and then going out to Madrid. I mean, it must have been hard work, Steve.
Yes, it was hard work, yeah. Although I don't think jet lag was the issue, because I wasn't really there long enough to suffer from jet lag. It was just a sort of cumulative tiredness from constantly having your sleep interrupted.
Yeah.
And, not knowing what... Basically, you were kind of like, okay, it's Sunday, I must be in Madrid, because you didn't know where you were, what day of the week it was, or anything.
Mm-hmm.
But
violins playing there.
Yes, I was in San Francisco with LG to get hands-on with the W7, which is their wallpaper OLED TV.
So San Francisco, your kind of town, eh?
Lovely place. I love San Francisco. It's a gorgeous town. Very nice. Although, obviously, now they've decriminalised marijuana to a large degree in California. Walking down the street, all you could smell was pot everywhere. Everyone seemed to be smoking pot. It's a wonder anything gets done in San Francisco.
That explains why, the neighbourhood you were walking down, you didn't get mugged.
There were some... It's a strange... America's always been a strange place for me, because you have, unlike London, where there's nice areas and not so nice areas. In America, it seems to be nice street, not so nice street. Nice street, not so nice street. You don't seem to have an area as much as just a street. So you'll turn a corner and you'll be a lovely, very nice area. And suddenly you find yourself in a strictly rough area full of tramps and winos and rough types. And it can be quite scary.
Rough types.
Ne'er-do-wells.
Travel information brought to you by Enid Blyton here.
All right.
Were there any vagabonds?
Ruffians.
There were some hooligans.
So it was pimps there with their big sheepskin jackets on and
Huggy Bear.
A bit warm for that, to be honest. Weather was nice. It was lovely to see the sun for the first time in about 2 months.
How many dark green Mustangs did you see?
I didn't see any. Steve McQueen was not in residence, I'm afraid.
He's dead, Steve, as nobody tells you.
Is he? No.
Spoilers. I know.
Hang on. I saw him in an advert for a Ford Puma not so long ago.
Yeah.
Well, 20 years, but yeah, same difference.
Yeah, I was just thinking, when was the last time the Ford Puma was around? Is that the last time you watched ITV? Is it, Steve?
Probably
20 years ago. Right. Anyway, so you were there to see
talk about OLED TV.
Yeah. You were there to see the wallpaper OLED TV. Now, The thing here is that all the press from across the world, so Europe, UK, and the US, were all invited to the same venue to look at the TV under the same conditions, because basically they're not going to be able to send this out for review just because it'd get broken within 5 minutes. Yeah. And if it went to certain reviewers in the UK, it'd be broken within 2 minutes. It wouldn't even be out the box and it would be smashed to bits. So that's the reason why they've invited everybody out. So it wasn't under our conditions, our normal reviewing conditions, and as such, we've not awarded any badges or any points or any scores or anything, but we have done a hands-on with this. So what were the general thoughts if people haven't, they've been lazy and just haven't bothered reading your review? Overall, I was impressed, I have to say, because they did have the W7 there. As you say, Phil, it's not going
getting sent out for review for obvious reasons. They also had an E7 there as well, so I got a chance to look at 2 of their range. I mean, the range includes the B, C, and G as well. And I have to say, I was impressed. I felt that they've addressed certain aspects of the performance that we've raised last year, and not just us, but other people as well, but has been raised last year as being an issue with OLED. So particularly its performance just above black. They've made efforts to improve that. And in my experience, testing it with material, obviously, like you say, it wasn't under our control conditions that we normally use, but certainly it appeared there was more detail just above black than there had been on the previous generations. And it did have an E6 there as well to compare directly, so that helped. In terms of measurements, I found that the performance out of the box was pretty good, but after calibration, it was really good. The CMS still doesn't work properly, but as it happens, you don't really need it because once you calibrated the grayscale, the color accuracy was excellent.
And I guess that points to the whole golden sample issue as well. LG did supply these TVs and so on, but they're supplying these TVs with software that doesn't work, so they're not golden samples in any way.
I don't think at all, no, because like I say, the grayscale wasn't perfect out of the box. I mean, there was too much red in it, and it needed calibrating. So I don't think they were tweaking these prior to having them tested. And but what is interesting is that they have improved the color accuracy. They're using 17 by 17 by 17 3D lookup tables now. So that was evident, I think, in terms of its tracking. It did look very good, both for SDR and HDR content, and it also tracked the PQ-EOTF very well, although they've deliberately tracked it slightly away from the PQ-EOTF curve because their view was rather than tracking it exactly and then having it kind of car clipping at the top, they wanted to give it a little bit of headroom and a little bit of space. They felt it gave it a better overall performance. There are no standards for HDR. It is entirely up to each manufacturer how they implement the tone mapping. This was LG's opinion. I mean, it's their technology, so that's the approach they've taken, which seems fair enough to me. I thought it looked really good with HDR content. It is slightly brighter than last year. Not massive, it's about 25% brighter than previous generation of panels. So there is a bit more punch to the highlights. Obviously, they're more precise because it's an OLED TV and self-emitting. One thing they have improved substantially from last year, and I think this is something that will please a lot of gamers, is they've got the input lag down to 21 milliseconds, both in SDR and HDR. So if you're a gamer, that's definitely good news. Because I think there was more like 38 to 40 milliseconds last year.
That'd be imperceivable.
I don't think. Well, yes,
if you're playing online, you've got more lag on your online through your router than you have from the TV to the handset. Absolutely.
There's the lag from the controller. There's the lag from the internet. There's the lag from being a human being. So the TV lag is probably the least of your worries, I should imagine, most of the time. But people do sit there and moan about it, even though I don't think anyone could tell the difference for 20 milliseconds.
No, I mean,
Mr. Botwright, do you think there's any? Are you that incredibly responsive and have cat-like reactions that you can tell the difference between 20 and 40 milliseconds?
No. I think in general, anything that's coming kind of about 40 milliseconds and below, I think you're in the kind of excellent range, and I don't think there's going to be a great deal of difference there. I think though, I have played on sets where it's been kind of above 50 milliseconds, and yeah, there is something. I don't know whether it's kind of just some kind of bias. You're kind of assuming that you're seeing it, but there is that kind of imperceptible, just slight disconnect between a button press and something happening. I think it's generally once you get down, so you're kind of significantly lower than a frame, say, then it's going to be absolutely no difference.
Yeah, absolutely.
But a frame is 32 milliseconds at 30 frames per second, and for 60 frames per second, it's 16 milliseconds. So if, you can tell. If you anything over sort of 48, I think you can probably tell. Yeah,
but I mean, it also depends, as you said, what kind of game you're playing. If you're playing something, online multiplayer, then things like the netcode and as you say, the lag, but from various different things are coming into play, and so therefore it's very hard to kind of pinpoint which one thing is kind of causing that slight disconnect. However, particularly if you're into fighting games, that kind of thing, where people are timing things based on frames, if you've got those kind of reactions, then obviously that makes a difference, because then you're into a world where people are talking about using CRT monitors and the things, so they're getting almost kind of no input lag.
Yeah, I think where there's been a big improvement has been in HDR terms, because a lot of manufacturers, and LG were one of them, didn't have a game mode initially for HDR. So then you were talking about sort of 90 to 100 milliseconds of lag, which was very noticeable. Now we're talking about 20 milliseconds in both SDR and HDR. So I think we're into the point where that's an imperceivable lag for both types of gaming. And I think that's going to go well.
Yeah, I think it's just more kind of also ease of use, because it was, as soon as HDR came in, it seemed like various different manufacturers had so many different settings associated with it that people were trying to unpick what it was that was putting in the lag. So just the idea of just having a kind of one size fits all game mode that has good enough input lag, that's a kind of huge boost to it. Because still, I mean, with LG's 2016 sets, there are still people kind of waiting and unsure as to which sets have had the firmware updates, and what the lag is like in particular modes, or people who are, say, playing in one mode and don't realize that it has kind of boosted the input lag. So yeah, this is a pretty big thing, I think.
Yeah, you mentioned different sets having different upgrades for last year's models. That's really related to the B6, although interestingly the G6 also had a slightly different platform. That won't be the case this year. This year it's a single platform across all the ranges. Quite why they've got 5 different ranges with exactly the same picture quality but different prices is beyond me. I mean, particularly when you get down to the B and the C, where they've got the same price. So you're really just saying, do I want a curved stand or do I want a sloped alpine stand? That's basically your decision-making process. There's no 3D on any of these TVs, so there's not even that differentiation like you had last year.
Yeah, but again, it's a numbers game, isn't it? They can say they've got 5 OLED TVs.
Exactly. That's what they're doing, which is kind of, I don't know, I could see the logic in it to a degree. You want to say you have different ranges of TVs, different ranges of OLED TVs, but you'd think if they just stuck with, say, a sort of a high-end model and a low-end model and had some sort of differentiation between the two, they could mass produce them easier, and without having all these differentiations in terms of cosmetic design, and get the prices down. But although I don't think the prices are unreasonable this year, given all the things that have been happening since last year. I think LG have done quite a good job of keeping particularly the B and the C range, at 2,999 for the 55-inch model. That's actually comparable where it was this time last year. And obviously these are more advanced panels, so that's not bad. In terms of features, obviously, as we've mentioned from CES, they've got every version of HDR you can think of. So you've got HDR10, Dolby Vision, HLG, and also Technicolor. So performance-wise, picture-wise, brilliant. I thought it was really impressive. I really liked it. Where I thought, and obviously the wallpaper design itself is impressive. There's no question about it. When you see it hung up on a wall, it's just basically it's like a window. It's an incredible piece of design. In order to do that, they obviously have put everything else: amplification, speakers, processing, connections are all in this all-in-one box. Now, I stressed the reason I'm calling it an all-in-one box is because we were told, although not by LG but by Dolby, it's not a soundbar. Not to call it that, it's more of an all-in-one box. And the reason they didn't want us to call it a soundbar so much was because up until that trip last week, me and everyone else have been referring to it as a Dolby Atmos soundbar. Now, these TVs do support Dolby Atmos. All of LG's range of OLEDs do this year. But it was only when we got to Dolby that they were stressing that these upward firing drivers aren't bouncing sounds off the ceiling. It's not creating an overhead effect. They're meant to just push the sound up to raise it to the level of where the screen is, because this all-in-one box will be beneath the TV. So it's got certain aspects of a soundbar, and it does support Dolby Atmos, although only over Dolby Digital Plus and not via True HD. And it's not a full Atmos experience. So basically what it is a 4.2.0 performance. There are 2 subwoofers built into the all-in-one box, and there are 4 drivers, 2 firing forward, 2 firing up, but it's not a proper overhead experience or even a bouncing off the ceiling kind of experience. So that was interesting, because we weren't told that when we were actually testing it. It was only told the day after, when we couldn't work out why we weren't getting Atmos from True HD sources, and then of course it turns out it doesn't support True HD, it only supports Atmos via Dolby Digital Plus, which obviously means it's aimed more at streaming services, which is how that is being delivered via people like Vudu currently. In terms of its performance with Atmos, yes, there was a greater sense of immersion and sort of a more open room-filling sound with it, which was quite good, but it had absolutely no bass whatsoever. And being very familiar with some of those Dolby Atmos trailers, it was missing a lot. So do not go into this expecting to get some all singing, all dancing Atmos experience, because you're not going to get it.
See, the problem for most of our listeners will be that they'll have a sound solution already. So if you're interested in the wallpaper TV, this box then becomes, well, it starts getting in the way. It's redundant, although it can't be redundant because that's where your inputs are and everything else. So I'm guessing it's a proprietary cable as well that goes from that box up to the screen. So how far can you take things? I mean, how far can you get rid of this box?
You couldn't get rid of the box because, as you say, Phil, it's an integral part of the TV. I mean, it's essentially where everything else resides.
Hiding it away in a cabinet or something like that. I mean, how long is the lead from that to the TV?
There are 2 leads available. There's the standard one, which I think is something like 43 centimeters, but there's also a much longer lead you can buy as well, an optional lead. It's because obviously they've taken into account the fact that if you're wall mounting it, you could be quite a long way from the box. But obviously the box is meant to be beneath the TV. That was the whole idea of it. And you're right, Phil. People spending £8,000 on an OLED television are almost certainly going to have some sort of sound solution already. And I did point that out to LG, and they did say they were investigating the idea of doing a version with just a small receiver box, purely for all the other stuff,
like Samsung does with their little box of tricks.
Similar to that.
That's what you need.
Yeah. You'd have a little box with the processing and the connections, without the audio aspects, and I think that would actually go down really well, because it would reduce the cost slightly, because you are essentially paying for this box, and as you say, Phil, it's largely going to be redundant. So you're paying for something you're not going to use, and also a smaller box would be easier to hide away in an equipment rack, for example. So yeah, they are looking at that. I mean, yeah, the technology is impressive. The wallpaper aspect is really impressive. The picture performance was excellent. I think maybe the sound side of it and the all-in-one box side of it may be off-putting for some people. Although I don't know how many they're going to sell at $8,000 a pop anyway, and that's for the 65-inch model. It's 23,000 for
that's the big point, isn't it? It's prices, and like you say, I mean, if you're getting the same picture quality on the B7 compared to the W7, I mean, all you're paying for there is the design aspect and so on. So that's quite a bit of difference in terms of cash. It's what, nearly $6,000?
Yeah, exactly.
$5,000. Sorry, my maths is not that great.
Was it 8 to 3? Yeah, $5,000. So it's $5,000 difference. But I mean, last year you could say, well, a lot of people bought the E6, for example, not because they wanted the built-in soundbar, but because they wanted 3D. This year, none of the models have got 3D. So you literally are just selecting up purely on what you want in terms of cosmetics and sound. So if you want a soundbar built into your OLED TV, then you've got the E7 or the G7 to select. If you're not interested in that, then it's really a question of whether you like the curved crescent stand on the B7 or the alpine slope stand on the E7. I mean, that's really what you're down to.
It's going to be interesting.
Steve, in those instances, all of them then proceed to wall mount in the same way.
They do, except obviously with the E7 and the G7, it's slightly different because you've got this built-in soundbar, so that you can wall mount them both. With the E7, it's kind of built in along the bottom, like a bar along the bottom of the screen. With the G7, as with last year, it kind of rotates. The bottom bit rotates around behind, so you have a soundbar firing forward and also a sort of a subwoofer aspect behind the screen. But they can be wall mounted, yes.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see how they do. We're waiting to get obviously review samples that we can have into our testing environment and get that going, and hopefully that'll be quite soon. And of course there is the hands-on review, which is up on the site now. There's also a video there with interviews with Rob Taylor and Neil Robinson, quite a technical interviews there, so if you're interested in the technical side of these screens, go and watch that. It's on our YouTube channel, and it's also on AVForums. If you go to the menu and select videos, you'll be able to find it there. Right, so the prices have also been announced. There is a story on the homepage for that if you want all the prices as well. So everything's there on the forums for you to go and have a look at. And of course there's the discussion threads, which are running into many pages already because there's a lot of interest in OLED TV. So let's move things along slightly. We're still going to be talking OLED TVs, but Steve went to Madrid directly after San Francisco, and it was Philips' launch. So they've launched a new OLED TV, and it looks to me, Steve, that this is more of a mass market compared to the first TV, the 901.
Yeah, that's right. It's the 9002, and they definitely are going for a cheaper, more mass market approach. So the 901 was a bit of a sort of high-end model, had this built-in soundbar, had those wide apart feet, very well made, really good OLED TV. Very impressed with the picture performance. Obviously, it used last year's panel, and it came late to the market, so that kind of worked against it slightly, and it was expensive. But and it doesn't have Dolby Vision, and neither does the new one. But this is a kind of a similar TV. Probably using this year's panel, although strangely they weren't talking to Danny Tack, who's the sort of technical guru at Philips. He wasn't entirely sure, but they're supposed to be using this year's panel. So they were quoting brighter peak brightness numbers, so higher peak brightness numbers. So that suggests it is this year's OLED panel from LG Display. But yeah, they are going for a cheaper approach in terms of there's none of the built-in soundbar, there's a simpler stand, and also probably for most people a better stand because it's more central and not at either end of the panel, so it's easier to position it on most surfaces, and a slightly less high quality build quality, but it still looked great, I thought, and picture quality looked great in terms of what I saw. Obviously there was no testing or anything, it was just purely out of show. But yeah, they're going for a more mass market appeal. Only 55 inches this time again. They would like to do a 65 inch as well. I think the problem at the moment is more an issue of just supply and demand. I mean, there's only one company making these panels, and everyone, you've got Philips, Panasonic, LG, and Sony, and obviously LG are going to get first dibs. So you've got all these people queuing up for panels. So some manufacturers are using 65 inch, for example. Panasonic have got the EZ 1002. That's 65 inch only. In the case of Philips, they've got the 9002, and that's 55 inch only at the moment. And I suspect that's partly less of a business decision and more of an issue of just getting hold of panels. So they've got that coming out, and that's good news. So we've got two. So they're still carrying over the 901. So you can have two different OLED TVs to choose from Philips. You've got five different.
Where can you buy them, Steve?
John Lewis. You can buy them in John Lewis. The only problem is that apparently John Lewis is sort of, rather than taking in a load and storing them, they're only taking in shipments at a time, and then they're being sold out almost immediately. So yes, you can buy them in John Lewis, but there is a bit of a wait because they are selling them as fast as they get them in, which I guess is good news for Philips, but it's not so good news if you're a consumer trying to buy one. Their new range will be available in a lot of different stores, so Richer Sounds, John Lewis, and a couple of others as well. But that has always been the problem with Philips, isn't it? They've been making some great TVs over the last few years, but getting your hands on them has been a real issue, or they haven't been released in the UK at all. All the TVs in the articles on the site, though the ones that the managing director, the UK managing director, Graham Speake, showed me personally, are definitely the ones coming to the UK, because there are other models on display as well that are not coming to the UK. So I only covered the ones that are definitely going to be released in the UK.
I guess the good thing there is that we are getting the two OLEDs, and we're also getting the I forget the model number. It's the 7 Series, which looks really quite nice.
7502.
Yeah, which looks really quite nice with a brushed metal finish and that kind of thing. Because normally when you're talking companies who I guess they no longer exist, they're coming back, but that's more the names being used under license. But the likes of Toshiba and so on, near the end, they would take you on press trips and stuff. I remember going all the way to Rome on a press trip, being shown this fantastic TV, top of the range TV, using the new processing chip and all the rest of it. Only be told that after I'd done the video, shot the interviews and all the rest of it, that TV wasn't coming to the UK. And a lot of companies started doing that and stopped bringing their high-end TVs in. So they might be difficult to get hold of, but it's good to see that Philips TP Vision are actually going to bring the higher-end TVs into the UK, and not abandon it like other companies did, and then those companies ultimately went under.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, so you've got the two OLEDs coming to the UK. You've got the 7502, which is the current sort of flagship LCD television. This is the 7,000 range, and there's also going to be 4 models from the 6,000 range. What was interesting and a bit surprising was that all the models announced, all the LCD models announced at the show this week, use IPS panels. And previously, and I know for a fact, Danny Tack, who's as I mentioned earlier, the sort of technical guru over at Philips, doesn't like IPS. He prefers VA for the reasons that they deliver deeper blacks and better contrast performance. Obviously, they don't have as wide a viewing angle. So this was a bit of a strange choice from Philips TV Vision because it goes against things they've been doing in the past. When asked why, they said, well, this range is a lower tier range. Even the 7502 is considered to be a slightly lower tier range. So they're aimed at families and, more than family viewing, where you've got people sat, not necessarily sat in the sweet spot, but sat across the whole lounge, and viewing angles are important, so they've gone for that. I mean, you could tell they were IPS panels, not just by standing off to the side, but also just by the fact that the blacks and the sort of contrast performance wasn't as good as it would be on a VA panel. Having said that, what is interesting is that apart from the 7502, which uses edge LED lighting, all the others, all the 6000 series are all direct LED, which certainly helps a bit, particularly with things like HDR, and they all support HDR, HDR10, and HLG. Now, if you're paying attention, you notice there's a 9000 series, which is the OLEDs, 7000 and 6000. No mention of an 8000 series. So some fairly heavy hints were dropped that we'll be seeing an 8000 series flagship LCD model coming at IFA, and that's going to be a VA panel. That's going to be what I could work out, a VA panel, local array backlight, full array local dimming, probably Ultra HD premium certification, 1000 nits and quantum dot. So that's what's in the pipeline, and we were sort of teased a lot of this stuff, and some hints were dropped and this kind of thing. But that's basically what I was reading into it.
So they didn't make the mistake that they did last year by telling everybody exactly what was coming.
No, they teased it without actually just saying it outright. Well, the Danny kept his mouth shut, shall I say?
Right, so that's a Philips thing. Again, there is a video, there is an article. We don't need to go any further with that. I don't think there's anything else really to discuss about that hasn't been covered in the article. So lastly, TV-wise for this week, let's go to Samsung. They've now announced the availability and the pricing of their QLED range, and you're getting a one-on-one with the whole range, Steve, next Tuesday.
I am indeed, yes. I'll be getting a good look at the whole range and all the new technological features that are in them, in their QLED range at next Tuesday. They went on, they're available for pre-order as of the 15th of March, and they'll actually start shipping on the 29th of March. And yeah, I mean, we had a rough idea of what to expect from CES. We saw the Q9 and I think the Q8. I'm not sure we actually saw the Q7, but we knew that's what the range was going to be. And Samsung announced their pricing to go with it, which I've got to say, I felt was a little bit toppy in places. Particularly,
I was looking at last year's prices, just before we came on, and the equivalent models are significantly more expensive this year, aren't they?
Now you could say, well, that's understandable given that the pound against the dollar has just fallen through the floor in the last 6 months. And also, and this is something that's not been talked about widely, but I did talk about it with Philips, and they said, yes, absolutely true, is there's a serious shortage of LCD panels at the moment. It might explain why they've suddenly got a load of IPS panels in, actually. There is a serious shortage of LCD panels in the marketplace, so much so that Samsung are buying them from LG. Who thought we'd see that? So that's going to, supply, the pure basics of supply and demand mean it's going to drive up panel prices. You've got currency effects of Brexit, basically, which is driving up costs overall for all consumer products because everything's pretty much priced in US dollars. So I wasn't surprised necessarily to see that, but it looks as though LG are sort of absorbing some of those costs rather than passing them on to the consumer, as are some of the other manufacturers. Sony, for example, their pricing didn't seem ridiculous. It does not seem as though Samsung are doing that. And I think for what is essentially, it's it may be tweaked, but it's still basically an LCD television. They're going to struggle to sell them at those prices.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think they're being quite clever with this QLED marketing, obviously, and they're trying to lead customers down the garden path a bit. That it's a completely new tech, so maybe they're relying on that a little bit as well. Looking at the OLED pricing, it's obviously a bit cheaper than the equivalent OLEDs that LG have got out, but if they can play off this QLED marketing and make it out to be something new, they might be able to carry those prices for a little bit at least. But I would expect them to drop significantly throughout the year.
It's interesting that they're still doing that. Basically, if you look at the actual model numbers, it's like Q7F, which is flat, and there's also Q7C, which is curved. There's the Q8C, which is curved. There's no flat version of the Q8, and then there's the Q9, which is only available as flat. So they're still pushing the curved screens, and interestingly, the curved screens are more expensive. So I can see those not selling at all, given that most people don't seem to like curved screens, and they're going to have to pay more for the privilege. But looking at the 55-inch Q8C, that's $2,999, so it's the same price as the C7 or the B7 55-inch OLED. And even the Q7F, which is the cheapest, you can get the 55-inch for that is $299, and the The 65-inch Q9F, which is the flagship model, is 489, nearly £5,000. I mean, I could be wrong here, but you said you looked at last year's prices, Mark. That's more than the 9,500 last year, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, significantly more, I think.
Yeah, I mean, they are significant. I didn't work out any percentages, but there are a few £100, even at the 7F is like £400 more than the 7,000. It's big numbers.
So they better be good.
Yeah.
Is anyone else still doing curved screens, or are they alone now?
They are alone now. I haven't seen a single curved screen from anybody else. And I think,
I wonder if there's going to be a petition to save those. Something tells me there isn't.
No. We knew that it was going to quietly die away, and you're definitely seeing the effects of that right now.
You can look forward to a nostalgic Channel 4 series in 2015. I remember 2017 and curved screens.
Well, I mean, I don't. My pet theory on this is when OLED was at the more conceptual stage, and it's like, look, because of its nature, it can be curved and applied, and essentially simply to head this notional advantage off at the pass, Samsung went to the effort and engineering of curving an LCD. And as far as they were concerned, I think it came down very simply to it didn't matter if it worked or not. It simply nullified a notional advantage of OLED. That's all that I'm increasingly convinced that's pretty much the only reason they did it.
I think we all said that
I think
at the
there's
time.
probably some truth to that.
You know, essentially, if it was a success, hooray, they had a range of curved televisions. If it wasn't, then it's removed an advantage of OLED where it's much easier for them to do it than it is technically for an LCD. Turns out nobody wants a bendy television, so away it goes.
From the curve point of view, that is the case, but I'm still waiting on the day where your OLED works the same way as a roll-down screen. And I think it will come one day.
Well, it might do, but I hope it's more reliable than most blinds that I've bought over the years, where, you know, sooner or later you pull it in a bad mood and then that's unspooled and on the floor.
That's user error, though. That's nothing to do with the TV build quality. That's you being too
Unfisted.
Well, yeah, okay, but there's a world of difference between angrily pressing a standby button and angrily then interacting physically with the television and risking damaging it.
I think all blinds die in the end, don't they?
This is true, yeah.
All blinds go to heaven.
Well, no, they go
That's
to hell.
a philosophical point.
You know, there's a road to hell. There's only a stairway to heaven. That tells you where everything's going.
Oh my God, this is existentialism at its very worst, isn't it?
Too much for the morning.
Yeah, I've only had one cup of coffee.
Yeah, I've only had one cream egg.
It'll be interesting to see how this plays out over the next few months, because I suspect those Samsung prices are going to plummet pretty quickly.
I think there are a lot of people.
Too.
I think there are a lot of people who are in a kind of similar position to me, which is still with a 1080p set, figuring that this was the year to jump on 4K, and now thinking, not sure whether to perhaps go for a bargain for a 2016 set or whether to kind of wait and see how things pan out. But it seems like either 2017 could be the year that everything kicks on, or that a lot of people choose to sit out for one reason or another.
Yeah. I mean, there are still some things happening in terms of, you know, technological advances, although it looks like a lot of the panels are things like, for example, the LG panels. I mean, they're 120 hertz. Philips panels were 100p, and certainly in the case of the LG panels, they could actually accept 1080p at 120p, so they could accept a full HD ultra high frame rate signal, which is handy for gaming, and there's no technical reason why they couldn't do it for 4K as well. So there are some future proofing built into that. Plus, when asked about HDMI 2.1, they said that as long as it didn't exceed 18 gigabits a second, then there's no reason why they couldn't update that as well. So there is, even though there are changes coming along and more advances happening, there is some future proofing built into these TVs.
I think that's the big one, though. That's the big one, particularly for gamers. HDMI 2.1 is the kind of reason that people might sit out this year if there's no obvious kind of commitment or path towards compatibility with that. Simply because it brings with it things like variable refresh rate, which is quite literally a game changer. So again, a lot of people are kind of unsure whether, which sets from 2017, if you get new consoles saying in 2019, 2020 that can take advantage of it, then it makes either more sense to wait or get a decent flagship that's come down to a great price now.
Yeah, I can understand the reticence to jump in right now, and it does kind of make sense. I think what the best thing to do is, if you don't need a TV right now, is just to wait to see let everything get released, get it all reviewed, see what the prices settle down to, because they will change over the next few months. And then, obviously, as you run in towards second half of the year into the third or fourth quarter, then you're going to see significant price reductions, and you'll have a better idea of where we're going with things like HDMI 2.1. Because when you talk to the manufacturers, they don't necessarily know themselves yet, because it is still relatively new. But we will have a better idea by the summer.
Meanwhile, your periodic friendly reminder that the format standards for vinyl are completely agreed and finalised, and that if you buy one of those, it'll still work happily for decades to come.
Can't watch much on vinyl, though, can you?
Well, you can watch the hologram on the Force Awakens soundtrack, but yes, that's about the
Right, I think it's time to move on from TVs and Steve. So let's go to Hodge. Hodge, you've been playing with the Nintendo Switch. Have you gone and bought one yet, Mr. Botwright?
How dare you think that my resolve is so weak that I did try and go and buy one, but they'd sold out. So I'm being saved from myself by the lack of stock in shops right now.
Right. Well, Hodge is now going to rub it in your face because he's got one. So what do you think?
Well, yeah, it's good, but yeah, Mark, you've got a Wii U, so you've already got the biggest reason to buy a Switch, which is Zelda. There's not an abundance of software available. Let's put it that way. So if you've got a Wii U, you're sitting pretty for a few months until the must-have titles come out, or the must-have exclusive titles come out. It's a lovely bit of hardware, mostly. The build quality is really nice. The tablet screen's really impressive. It's an IPS panel. It's really, really bright, very colourful, but it looks really accurate as well. If you compare it to a calibrated telly, it looks more or less identical. It's spot on, really. There's no dead pixels on the pixel. I've done it again. Dead pixels. Can't stop myself with that word. Yeah, the screen uniformity was generally good, but on bright screens, certainly in the dark, there was a little bit of backlight bleed around the edges, but nothing noticeable really in the games. I did have the problem, or do currently have the problem, of the left Joy-Con disconnecting while you're playing or while you're using the on-screen keyboards, which it'll just seems to lose it for a couple of seconds. It didn't, and it kind of depends where it is in the house. So what Nintendo is saying about wireless speakers and Bluetooth devices interfering with the communications within the controller is definitely true, because if I move it into the lounge near my router and all the rest of the multiple boxes in there, it can happen quite frequently. But if I move it into the diner, it's not such a problem at all. The control is kind of the defining thing about the Switch. It can be done in three ways for those that don't know. You can hook it up as a traditional games controller on the grip that's supplied. You can stick them on the edges of the Switch console itself, so you have a tablet gaming experience, but with proper control. The screen's only 6.2 inches, which isn't massive, but the fact that you don't have to touch the screen to control anything kind of extends it, and it does fill your field of vision for the most part in the way you hold it. Certainly no complaints in that regard. In the more traditional format, I'm not a fan. The thumbsticks aren't offset from the directional and letter buttons, so they're directly above and below, and that's awkward sometimes, particularly when you're playing Zelda and you want to change weapons or something. You find you feel, well, I certainly do find myself fumbling about with my left thumb, trying to get it in the right position, and I find that awkward. So I mean, you can answer all these problems by getting yourself a Pro controller, but that's £60 extra on top of the £280 price tag, which I do think it's a little bit hard to justify when there's no bundle software. At least you got something with obviously the Wii sold on the back of Wii Sports, and that came with the console, and that made all the difference. I guess the answer to Wii Sports that the Switch has got is called 1-2 Switch, which I really think should have come with it instead of costing £35, and that's a series of mini games that utilise the controller in the third ways you can use it. So the Joy-Cons are separate items, the left and right Joy-Cons, so you can attach shoulder straps and make them into individual controllers for like local multiplayer games, and you can which can be done on the TV, or you can prop the Switch up on its back stand and play it just like that, which is obviously useful if you want to do it as a portable thing. But 1-2 Switch in itself is a bit of hit and miss, and a lot of the games are pretty forgettable and not really worthy of repeat.
You mean you haven't had any rooftop parties where you've been milking virtual cows?
I've tried to gather my friends. For this, but they're not interested. The kids have quite enjoyed it, but yeah, it's it's not brought any harmony to the home. They seem to argue about it all the time. Even when the Switch is the adjudicator of who's won, there seems to be inquiries a lot. So yeah, they quite like it, but they're not bowled over by the thing. Overall, I mean, if you can wait, Mark, then do, because I don't think there's really any real massive reason to buy it. I mean, the gaming on the Switch itself is the highlight for me, with the Joy-Cons attached either side, and just being able to pick it up and play that anywhere.
So can we call the middle bit the Joy Division then?
The Joy Division. Yeah, the Joy. Good, nice, like it. I'll stick that in the review. Yeah, it's a nice little thing, but it's desperately in need of some more software. Although arguably Zelda could take you at least a few months to complete.
What about the screen for outdoor use?
It's really good. It goes exceptionally bright. It's something I mentioned in the review. It's pretty resistant to sunlight. We got some sunlight earlier in the week, so I was able to test that out. Obviously, you can't do it in direct sunlight, but if provided your head or your body's between you and the sun, then you'll have no issues. It rejects ambient light really, really well, and it goes really, really bright without losing colour fidelity. Yeah, the screen's impressive, and it can definitely be done in most ambient light conditions. Obviously, direct sunlight is too much of a challenge. Overall, yeah, it's good. I think maybe some people will struggle to understand what it's all about. Having 3 configurations for the controller, is that a little bit unnecessary? I would probably say although it's marketed as a hybrid device for portable gaming and a home console, I would say it's a portable machine with TV functionalities. Because I prefer the control best in the sort of handheld format. If you do buy a Pro controller, that would change things, but yeah, I prefer it in handheld mode than I do attached to the TV. Zelda had a few frame rate issues in that mode as well, that you don't get on the tablet and you don't get on the Wii U. In terms of the look of Zelda in comparison between the two consoles, there's not much in it really. I'm watching on a 65, or playing on a 65-inch 4K TV, so that does most of the scaling anyway, and you're hard pressed to see any difference. Maybe a bit of textures here and a bit of pop in on the Wii U you don't get on the Switch. But yeah, as a Wii U owner, Mark, I would just hang fire until there's more, and maybe a price drop or at least some bundled software with it.
And are you going to listen to him, Mr. Botwright, or are you just going to go by when they come back in?
I might have a window open on my browser with the stock checker refreshing, but
I mean, you'll enjoy it. Of course, you'll enjoy it. It's a new Nintendo console, and there's lots to like. But yeah, if you've got Zelda on the Wii U, then that's the real wow factor about it, really.
Yeah, I think with any console, the smart decision is always: is there a game you want to buy on it that you will buy the system for, rather than deciding I like the look of the system. Now, what game can I find to play on it? You always end up playing a few absolute stinkers at launch and convincing yourself that you really want to play it. I'm not sure whether I've quite hit that level where I'm going to be spending, £40 on Bomberman R or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's only 12 or 13 titles in the eShop anyway available. There's a real paucity of software, and beyond snipper clips, which I download the demo for, which is good fun. I couldn't see myself buying anything else if it was my own money. I
think if it had more functionality out of the box, I would be more tempted to.
I haven't covered the media functions, of which there are none.
Yeah, exactly.
There's nothing. I can't even view a photo on it. You can view screenshots that you take during your gaming, but and share them to Facebook and Twitter, I think, maybe Instagram. But that's about it. There's nothing. There is a browser apparently that you can access that's built in, but it's not really available to the general public. But yeah, it is very much lacking in the media functionalities, and even when they do come, there's only 60 hertz output, so iPlayer will be knackered completely. You can't watch iPlayer at 60 hertz. It looks awful on the big screen. There's no 24 hertz output, so you can't really watch movies successfully. A couple of other points on that actually. There's no Dolby licensing, so you'd be definitely only limited to stereo. There's no digital audio out, so you have to have an HDMI capable receiver or soundbar if you want that accepts LPCM 5.1. There's no headphone jack unless you play in the handheld format. So if you want to game on the TV, you'll have to make other arrangements basically because there's no headphone jack built into the grip, and that's shortcoming.
Can you still plug it in though? Say the headphones into the unit if you with the long cable. Once you plug it into the grip, does that still work?
I've not tried. It'd be a long way off for my cable to reach that. Yeah, I guess that might work. Yeah, that might work actually. Okay. I'll try that out. And I'll
if we hear you've hanged yourself with your cable, then we'll know what happened.
It wouldn't be very convenient. It'd look a bit messy. But I mean, I really think they should have put a headphone jack. Yeah, that's the way I'm going to go, mate.
Killed whilst playing 1-2 switch, getting marbles in a box.
I tell you what, I nearly did kill myself doing the boxing. Jesus. But a tip for grown-ups who take on their kids at these games: use short arm movements. And don't fully extend. Just give yourself a chance. I'm getting pummeled by my 8-year-old. I just worked out because her arm was extending fully more quickly than mine was. So I reduced myself to little rabbit type punches and beat the hell out of her.
There we go. AVForums always at the cutting edge of advice for you. There you go. Another bit of pure gold there from Mark. And on that note, let's move on to movie news, which is next. Okay, so moving on to movie news. I don't know how I'll manage this. I did go to the cinema last week. I went to see Kong Skull Island. So I should technically be about -6 on the unlimited card, whereas I'm actually -12 because what I did was I went on Monday, which is half price day. so the ticket was only £6. So I'm about -12 at the minute to get myself back into the black. Right, so Kong Skull Island, I said I was going to review that. 7 out of 10. It's good popcorn fun. Go see it.
I would agree with that, by the way.
I don't think there's much else to say. It's a B movie. You know what you're getting into when you're talking about a film with monsters. There's a B movie that you're going to have lots of expendable cast members. You're going to have an ensemble cast that you don't ever get to know. You don't get to know any of the characters. You don't get to feel any empathy for the characters. You don't get to feel of their plight. All you want is the big monsters beating the shit out of each other, and that's exactly what you get for the running time of the movie because they don't even take much time to set it up. It's supposed to be in the same universe as Monarch. The only reason you know that is that there's a suitcase with the emblem on as they get out of a car, which gives you that clue. So this is the same universe as Godzilla movie, and I don't think I'm giving away any spoilers by saying that.
There's also a little sequence right at the end of the credits too, isn't there, where they set up?
There is. They set up another movie, even though this one is getting mixed reviews. But to be honest with you, this is a type of movie that cinema was made for. It's the same way as the Jurassic Park movies and other monster movies like Godzilla. You go for the spectacle, and there's plenty of spectacle in here. It's beautifully shot. The effects are absolutely astounding. The characterization is poor. They try to use the old trope of Kong falling for the female, although luckily it just falls flat in its face in this movie. So they spend all of 3 minutes on it, which gives you an idea of what it's all about. It's fantastic in terms of the scenery, the way it's been shot, the animals, the monsters, the violence, the on-screen action. The soundtrack is completely bombastic. It'll make a great demo disc when it comes out, and I have no doubt that Steve will buy the UHD Blu-ray.
It will look and sound stunning. Yeah.
It will. 7 out of 10. If you want popcorn fun and big monsters beating the shit out of each other, go see it. One thing. Yes, this is what I'm going to say. It's a 12A. There is no way on earth that this is a 12A. There is a lot of violence in this. There's a lot of really intense action, really intense stuff going on. I jumped a few times. There were adults and children walking out at the screening that I was in after the helicopter sequence because it is so intense. So if you've got kids, I would probably go and see the film first before taking the kids to see it, just to see, because there's no way this is a 12. It should have been a 15.
Yeah, I was quite surprised at some of the buds. I think that's a general trend, though. It seems to be, you kind of wonder, what have you got to do to get an 18 these days? Because some of the 15 certificate stuff is brutal. Like Logan, for example, was quite brutal in terms of the strong language and really extreme violence. This for a 12A, I thought there's a bit when that thing goes down the guy's throat too, which was really quite graphic. I don't want to give too much away when I'm saying that. I'll just say one thing though, Phil. My cinema has only got to do one thing right, which is project the bloody thing in its correct aspect ratio. And at the beginning, it's a 2.35 to 1 film. And at the beginning, it was being projected at 1.85 to 1, and I thought, oh, okay, it's World War II sequence. They're going to widen it out at some point. They're doing it deliberately. It's a creative decision. So I got to the credits, and the screenplay credit was missing at the ends, and I thought, they've got the side masking on, haven't they? They've still got the sodding side masking on. So I had to go out and have a massive row and go like, "You've got the side masking on, you idiots! You've only got to do one thing."
I'd love to have been a fly on the wall for that. That would have been amazing.
I was livid.
Yeah.
And then they stopped the film, took out the side masking, and put it back on again. It was like, oh.
Yeah, none of those problems at the Odeon at the Metro Centre. I'll give the Odeon at the Metro Centre, 10 stars. Big thumbs up. Presentation's always first class there. I remember the days there, Steve, when I used to go to a Warner Village cinema or somewhere like that, the old UCI or whatever, and I have literally been in screenings where the film has been projected on the ceiling. Missed the screen completely.
That takes some doing, doesn't it?
I mean, that was back in the days where they used to loop the film along the projection room if they had 2 or 3 showings, and it was the same bit of film, but it went all the way down to the far end and then all the way back up and through another projector and then all the way up and through the next one. And it was the days before automation and zooms and stuff, so it was in the days where the lenses would physically move in between the projector and the screen, and the projectionist would have to come and check it, and obviously the projectionist forgot to come and check and it was being projected on the ceiling. It has happened.
But that minor point aside, I did enjoy the film. And John C. Reilly just stole it, didn't he?
He did, and I'm not going to say any more because we have been accused of giving spoilers away in the past, so I'm not going to say any more other than, if you want a big fun popcorn, monsters beating the shit out of each other, go see it. It's great fun, and the effects, it's ILM that do the effects as well, and the effects are absolutely astonishing. Really, really good. Right, so I have -12 on my card. Steve, what can I go to and see?
Well, this week you have 2 options, really 2 major options, which is Chips.
I've never turned down Chips ever.
Yeah, does anyone remember the TV series from the 70s?
I remember of it. I don't remember anything of it.
I'm old enough to remember, but I didn't like it.
Yeah, I don't have any memories of any episodes or anything, but I do remember it.
I do remember watching it. I remember Eric Estrada was
It was on ITV, wasn't it? You weren't allowed to watch that.
I did watch a bit of Chips.
Oh, you naughty boy.
But I can't remember thinking it was particularly good. I remember that. I don't know whether it warrants a film. I mean, it's written and directed and stars Dax Shepard, who is a comedian. So I'm assuming this is a comedic take.
It is. I've seen a couple of trailers now. It's very much. It's not taking itself very seriously. It knows what it is, and it's very self-knowing, if you know what I mean, in terms of the comedy and stuff as well. It's. It looks like being a straight-out comedy, so it's either going to work or it's going to land flat in its face, and I think I'm prepared to say it'll land flat in its face.
I think it's a safe bet. I don't think anyone was clamouring for a Chips movie. Michael Peña's in it, though, playing Ponch, and to be fair, based upon Ant-Man, he's got some great comic timing, so maybe it'll work. But I think it might be a miss. Alternatively, if you want to get some value for money out of your card, Phil, there's also Life, which looks a lot more interesting. This is set aboard the International Space Station. There's a probe that's been sent to Mars and comes back from Mars, and they have to capture it and then analyse the results for the soil samples brought back from the Martian surface. And things do not go according to plan.
This sounds like Alien.
A little bit like Alien, yes. Obviously, it's meant to be taking a slightly more scientifically accurate approach, although I doubt it, judging by the trailer I saw before Skull Island last night.
The problem I have with the trailer is taking Ryan Reynolds seriously anymore.
As an astronaut.
No, just taking him serious anymore in anything he does now. He is Deadpool and he's the wisecracker comedian. That's it. It's so difficult to take him seriously anymore. It's
got a good cast there because, like you said, Ryan Reynolds. It's also got Jake Gyllenhaal and Rebecca Ferguson. I kind of, it looked like it. I like a nice space film. I like a good sci-fi. So I probably will go and see it.
I think
I'm a bit worried for Jake Gyllenhaal, in so much as he appears to be developing what could be termed as Nicolas Cage syndrome, whereupon basically he'll receive either an email or a letter going, "Would you be interested?" And he doesn't read any further than that and just goes, "Yes." So every now and again, he still a pit crops up in stuff where he is absolutely fantastic. I mean, we've all had this conversation. Nightcrawler. That's an extraordinary performance. I thought he was pretty good in The Fighter as well, things like that. but then Prince of Persia, yes, and so on and so forth. It's just like, are you do you need something to do, Jake? Yes. All right, well, go and have a go in this film. What's it about?
I guess sometimes they've got bills to pay, Ed, and just like anybody, you'll take. I mean, you're a freelancer. I'm sure
this
you
is
take
true.
on...
I mean, Nicolas Cage does have enormous bills to pay. I mean, he has some unusual debts, and he had that enormous fine because he had that fossilized skull that he wasn't supposed to have.
Okay.
So yeah, his methodology is clear. I wasn't aware that Mr. Gyllenhaal was in quite the same situation, but it's perfectly possible he is, I guess.
Yeah, I'm sure living in LA has its problems, and you've got to pay for things, unfortunately. Right, so that's a films this Friday. It's a choice between Chips and Life. I think I'll choose. I think I'll choose Life.
Or in your case, Chips for Life.
For those of us who still buy Blu-rays, Steve, I'm looking at the list here. I'd choose Arrival, I think.
Yeah. I mean, we talked about it at length a couple of weeks ago because obviously it came out on Ultra HD Blu-ray and Blu-ray earlier in the States. It's coming out on Blu-ray in the UK this week. No Ultra HD Blu-ray release, interestingly, though. At least not yet, not announced. And I think, we've discussed that at length. Yes, great film, really interesting movie. And probably better getting it on Blu-ray than Ultra HD Blu-ray, depending on what kind of display you're using, particularly if you've got a projector. But yeah, it would be my recommendation of the week, I think, in terms of the films on this list. Other films that are good are United Kingdom, certainly worth checking out. Made by the same director that made Belle, a film that I really, really liked. So I'd be interested in that. The Chamber, we only reviewed that at the cinema 2 weeks ago, so it's had a really quick transition to disc. Same goes for The Love Witch, which only came out at the cinema a couple of weeks ago. And an interesting film. Now, this is only available on DVD, but I put it on the list because I saw it, and I thought it was great. It's a film called Operation Avalanche, and it's basically a sort of found footage movie about a bunch of guys at the CIA faking the moon landing, and it's done really well. I mean, they don't fake the whole thing. What happens in the premise of the story is that the lander won't work. Grumman can't get the lander to deliver the lander in time for landing before the end of the decade. So they can get the astronauts to the moon, they can circle around the moon, they just can't land on the moon. So what they fake is the actual landing part. And they do it really, really well. And there's loads of cool stuff in there. There's bits involving Kubrick and all kinds of stuff. Really plays into the whole mythology of it, how they fake it. It's a really clever little film, and I recommend it highly if you get a chance to see it. I really, really enjoyed it.
Fine. Although I think Mitchell and Webb did everything that needed to be done about moon landing conspiracy.
It's really funny.
Right, so any crap that we need to buy on Ultra HD Blu-ray, Steve?
Well, actually, out this week you have, and I think everyone should be buying this without question, you've got Fast and Furious 6 and 7 hitting Ultra HD Blu-ray. Come
without
on!
question. Yeah.
And announced for Ultra HD Blu-ray, and this is for the US at least 25th of April, is La La Land. That's the big new announcement. So that's coming to Ultra HD Blu-ray very soon.
I'm going to have to buy it because I know the song's inside out now. I've been listening to it quite a bit on Tidal.
Well, I'm starting to know all the words because obviously some of my wife's pupils are starting to get quite enthusiastic about singing some of those. So I've still not seen the film. Probably won't see it for years. But like Frozen, I'll know all of the songs.
I'm kind of disappointed that I didn't get to see it on the big screen because I would like to have seen it on the big screen just to see what all the hype was about. To be honest, much the same way as I missed Moulin Rouge on the big screen. I wish I'd seen that in all its Technicolor glory on film.
I want my 2 hours back. I did see it on the big screen. What a shitstorm of a film. Hate it.
Disagree with you there, Ed.
I absolutely disagree with you there, Ed.
It's absolute. It's a collective insanity shared by a swathe of the population. It's unmitigated shit from start to finish. I hate it, and I want my life back.
Okay. Well, I guess we're all entitled to our reviews, and some people are wrong. Which you clearly are.
I don't review films, but to be honest, I find most of the output of Baz Luhrmann to be wildly overrated.
Well, I see it. I really like his stuff. I loved Romeo and Juliet.
Now you see, that's the exception. That's why I don't write off everything. I do like Romeo and Juliet. I think that's very, very clever. Everything else, bollocks.
So anyway, Steve, Moulin Rouge. I wish I'd seen it on the big screen. Did you get to see it? Did you have that luxury?
I did see it on the big screen, yes. And I must admit, for the first 10-15 minutes, I was like, with the whole, when they were first at the nightclub, and it's the whole can thing, and it's really in your face. And I was like, Christ, if it's going to be like this for 2 hours, I don't think I can handle this. This is overwhelming. After that, it calms down a bit. And then I really got into it, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I loved it. I thought it looked amazing. I thought Ewan McGregor, I mean, obviously he's in the new version of Beauty and the Beast, and he never gets anything but anything less than the full bollocks when he's singing.
Yeah,
and I thought he sung his heart out in that film.
Unfortunately, in Beauty and the Beast, Steve, go and have a listen on Tidal, because it's allo levels of French.
Well, to be fair,
accent.
it was like that in the original, wasn't it? It's a be our guest, be our guest. There's no way of doing that song without sounding like Renee from a lower low.
Yeah, but no, it's not Rennie. He sounds like the policeman. That's what he sounds
good moaning.
Like. Good moaning.
When I was back at university doing my degree, there was one guy on my course, and we did the same. One of the modules, we did the same module. So he would sit in the same lecture hall as me, week in, week out, and every week for the hour of the lecture, he would simply draw in biro a Lumiere from Beauty and the Beast as his notes for that lecture. And that it was odd in itself, but what did annoy me slightly is that he got a first. So clearly I had the wrong end of the stick, actually paying attention to what was being said. I should have just drawn more Disney characters. So yeah, that's my. I'd love
to see what the modules were in your degree. Were they like carpet bombing third world countries or something like that? Was it?
Do sod off. No, the one that we were both in there was military technology.
It wasn't far off then.
So I see this weekend would interest you. I'm sure you already know about it, but the old classified films of the US nuclear program are now available to be seen.
Deeply unpleasant. There were essentially because, as I understand, one, a certain amount of time has passed since the tests were run. Two, certain aspects of blast and shock stuff was kept both from the public, but also because it was data that was felt that certain other nations testing nuclear weapons might not be able to detect and work out quite as effectively. So some of these clips will show you shock waves and forces just moving in ways that are just bizarre. They just look totally wrong, but that's because essentially that data was retained for the use of the US government. It allowed them to model what would happen more effectively and so on and so forth from airbursts and things like that. So yes, in a deeply morbid sense, it is well worth a look. And if you are, as I think I've made this recommendation sometime in the past, if you're fascinated by that sort of Cold War sort of feudalism, there is a book called The Wizards of Armageddon. It's available on Amazon. And for considering the subject matter, it is an absolutely fantastic read. One of these days, it might even make a serviceable film.
Cool, good stuff. I watched a couple of them, and it's always impressive to see the sheer power being unleashed. It's terrifying. Anyway, and on that bombshell, literal. That's it for the podcast this week. My thanks to Steve Withers.
You must control your temper.
It's difficult, Steve. Mark Hodgkinson.
I use antlers in all of my decorating.
So do I, Mark. Ed Selley.
Oh dear, that didn't go very well, did it?
Usual shit, Ed. And Mark Botwright.
I say we kill the beast.
Don't forget, you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook, bookmark AVForums for latest reviews, news and video, and of course, leave us those 5-star ratings on iTunes, but only if you enjoyed the show. I'm Phil Hinton. Thank you very much for listening, and all being well, we'll see you next week.